So, welcome back everybody. Today we're going to talk about the results and the consequences of World War II for the U.S. at home and abroad. So we know that the Great Depression had not only ruined the American economy, but also those of Europe. The Europeans turned to new leaders to solve their problems. In America, it caused President Roosevelt to focus on our domestic problems, thereby adapting an isolationist stance from the old world's drama. The U.S., in doing this, let Mussolini get stronger in Italy, as well as Hitler in Germany. The Germans resented the Treaty of Versailles from World War I, which had crushed the German economy as well as their pride. Hitler did this by building up a military, which was against the rules. He occupied Austria, and the European leaders appeased Hitler at the Munich conference by allowing him to take Rhineland and Sudetenland to make sure that there was peace in our time. He was like a baby who cries until he gets candy. And once he got some candy, do you think he was going to stop until he gets more? So, with the dictators in place in Germany, Italy, Japan, and USSR, there were a lot of tough guys with big egos all trying to expand their territory. Trying to maintain its neutral stance, the U.S. signed the Neutrality Acts, which kept us from selling guns and giving loans to warring nations. Americans were also prohibited from sailing on warring nation ships because we all remember the Lusitania, right? When appeasement ultimately failed, as Hitler blitzkrieged his way through Poland in September 1939, FDR instituted the cash and carry policy in which warring nations could sail into U.S. ports and buy war supplies. But, with the British controlling the Atlantic at the time, who do you think he was really favoring? The American government then shed any remnants of neutrality by starting the Lend-Lease Agreement. In doing so, we declared America to be the great arsenal of democracy. The U.S. also had to deal with Japanese aggression in the Pacific by Tojo and Hirohito. FDR did this by ending our trade agreement with Japan, thereby depriving them of fuel and metal, which was necessary for further expansion. Japan then signed with Germany and Italy in the Tripartite Agreement. Then, on the morning of December 7, 1941, Japan launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, which killed 2,400 sailors and crippled our fleet. The following day, FDR urged Congress to declare war on Japan after the day that will live in infamy.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The United States was at peace with that nation, and at the solicitation of Japan, was still in conversation with its government and its emperor, looking toward the maintenance of peace in the Pacific.
So the War Powers Act was also set up to give the President increased authority during war times. The Office of Strategic Services was set up as well, which was a precursor to the CIA, which was used for spying and intelligence. The War Productions Board was made up to allocate materials for military use and limit production on civilian goods. There was also the Office of Price Administration, which instituted rationing and set prices. Henry Kaiser, also known as Sir Launcelot, used his miracle of production to increase shipbuilding from one about every 6 months to one ship every day by the end of the war. The federal budget increased from about $9 billion a year to over $98 billion by the end of the war. Do you think this got us out of the Great Depression? Well, if that didn't, the 17 million new jobs that were created, including Rosie the Riveter, also helped as well. Congress signed the Smith-Connolly War Disputes Act, which restricted the rights to strike during war times in essential industries such as steel and mining. The President also froze wages, rents, and prices to prevent inflation. Civilians rationed, held scrap drives, planted victory gardens, and bought billions of dollars in war bonds to help support the war. But during the war, the government sent 110,000 Japanese American citizens to internment camps in the desert for over 3 years. This caused billions of dollars in lost homes, businesses, jobs, and possessions. The government feared disloyalty and spying on their part. Once the Allies commenced the bombing of Germany and had a toehold in Europe after D-Day, the tide of the war was definitely being pushed towards the Allies. The Big Three leaders met at the Yalta Conference, a resort town in Russia. They did so to discuss post-war Europe and what to do with pesky old Germany, who started the war once again, and also to create a peacekeeping organization that we all know these days. Shortly after this, FDR died and Truman took over. Over in the Pacific, the Marines were island hopping their way to within range of Japan under General MacArthur. So, once the Allied forces made their way to Germany, in May 1945, Victory over Europe Day was declared, that is, VE Day. But the fight for Japan continued. With the Allies able to commit all their troops to the Pacific theater, commanders set a plan for a land invasion for November. But the military leaders feared this, because they were slated to have over 200,000 US deaths and over 1 million Japanese deaths. So, when realizing the amount of time, effort, and death that would result in a land invasion, the US considered using the atomic bomb. It was being developed since 1942 in the Manhattan Project by Einstein and Oppenheimer. This top-secret bomb was complete. 3 bombs were built, but they used one in testing in the desert in hopes that the other 2 would work. Truman told the Japanese if they didn't surrender, they would face destruction. Do you think they surrendered? No. So on August 6, 1945, the B-29 bomber Enola Gay dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima. In an instant, 70,000 people died within a 5-square-mile wasteland. But the emperor refused to surrender. On August 9th, the US dropped the second atomic bomb on Nagasaki. Another 40,000 died. The US threatens the use of a third one, even though we don't have one. So what do you think happens? Victory over Japan Day. Finally, August 14th, 1945, Japan surrendered. In September, Japanese and the Allies met on the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay to officially end the war. With this long war, the jobs that were created by the defense industry and the military ended the Great Depression. And now, with the end of the war, the rationing of gas, the rubbers, shoes, and food that were conserved and sent to the soldiers could now stay at home. So, the human toll of World War II was with over 20 million soldiers killed and millions more civilians. The US alone lost 400,000 and another 600,000 were wounded.